Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the JKL Media podcast. I'm here with my friends and co-hosts, Karen. Hello, Karen.
Hello.
And Jesse.
Hello, Lou. Hello, Karen.
And we're here to kind of do a follow-up episode to our previous one where Jesse was driving the bus and he wanted us to review Bruce Springsteen's Western Stars, which we did. And that prompted me to shuffle things around in my to be discussed pile. And I decided that we would talk about a Canadian band called the Tragically Hip, or as we just know them here as the Hip. And this is talking about music, as Jesse, I'm sure, can attest to, is probably the most vulnerable thing that you can do in terms of art, because the emotional connections that you make with music are so much different than you do with anything else, because the opportunity for communal experiences are much greater with music than they are with, say, watching a movie, though you can do that with a group, but definitely reading a book is a much more solitary experience. So music has more than any other forms of entertainment, though, has the ability to form a communal bonds, because it's something that you can have on in the background when you're with friends or family, and it creates these bookmarks of your life, really, that are so intertwined with your thoughts and your feelings that it's a totally different expression of creation that nothing else can really rival. So, and for Canadians, the Tragically Hip is something special. And we all have like our favorite bands, and we can go into whoever and whatever, but the Hip really cemented that emotional bond with the country as a whole in Canada. And their name now has a bit of irony to it because of what happened to the lead singer, Gord Downie, who turned out to have brain cancer and eventually succumbed to it and died. But what he did when he got this diagnosis back in 2015 is he wanted to do a final tour with the band cross country, and in the summer of 2015, and that's what he did. And it was one of those rare moments that brings a country together that you just don't see happen very often. I mean, in Canada, I can only really think of two moments that really parallel that, and one would be the 1972 Canada-Russia hockey series. This was the first time Canada and Russia had played at the professional level. Always before it had been, amateur teams in the Olympics and that. And that series was something that, if you know Canada, you know hockey, we're crazy about it. We would even get to watch the games in school. I was in school when this was going on, so we would get to watch those games in the gym on the TV. So that was quite something. And the other one was Terry Fox, who I don't know if any of our listeners are familiar with, but he was a young Canadian man that developed cancer, and he had to have his leg amputated. And he decided to run across Canada on a prosthetic leg and one leg. And it started out, as with many things in Canada, small and unnoticed on the East Coast. But by the time he got to Ontario, the story had started to pick up legs, so to speak, and he became nationally known. And again, tragically, he was not able to complete his journey, and this cancer reoccurred, and he never got to finish that run. But he inspired the nation, and there's annual Terry Fox runs every year for cancer that are still going on today. So yeah, it's I feel vulnerable right now, so I'm going on a little long here with this, but I'm just curious, because I don't know how outsiders react to the Hip, because obviously, Jesse and Karen, you won't have the same emotional connections that Canadians do to this group, which really became the soundtrack of our lives. But from a musical perspective, Jesse, because of Springsteen's ability to write evocative lyrics, I wonder how the hip struck you.
So about a week and a half ago, I had a couple of guys on the podcast, and one of them is the co-host of Rocking the Suburbs, a podcast from two dads. They do a daily podcast. They do 5 episodes a week. They're usually about 20, 25 minutes long. And they cover a lot of different music. And one of the things they do is they discuss that there is new music being made all the time. And the dad rock, that cliche, is if you're my age, you get stuck on classic rock from the 70s, and that's it. That's what stays on your turntable, or that stays in your iPod, or from your phone. And what they do is push classic rock, but also there is new music going up every day that, depending on your taste, you're going to like some of them. And the reason I tell that story is I mentioned that we were going to be doing this episode, and my thought was, how did I miss the Tragic Hip? How have I not heard of their music? Because it is amazing. And you wonder why it never, this isn't like it's a band in Australia that, we're neighbors. And, I've talked a little bit about this online with Skip, who does the Skip and Josh podcast. Skip actually sent us an email that one of us will read about this, because they've done an episode where they each picked their top 7 Tragically Hip songs. And he says they're a uniquely Canadian band, and maybe that's why it doesn't work. But this was a gift to me. I have been listening to them on and off. In fact, if I'm not listening to a podcast at work, I have the Tragically Hip on right now. And when I'm in the car, I'm listening to Jason Isbell, because I'm going to the Jason Isbell show in May, and I'm trying to immerse myself in those music. So both artists that I had not spent a lot of time with. So I adore them. And there are a couple of songs that I think are as good as songs as I've ever heard. So I really do think of this as a gift you've given me, because I never would have checked them out.
Cool. Karen?
Yeah, I have been over my life, and I probably haven't really mentioned this, but very enamored with different cultures, different, media arts from other countries. I have listened to a lot of stuff from Australia, from England, and I have liked a lot of things from Canada, and it really worries me that I didn't recognize the Tragically Hip. I had no idea that they did the soundtrack for Brain Candy. Kids in the Hall is a super favorite of mine. I watched SCTV. I stayed up late when I was a kid to watch SCTV. I love Rush. They're like one of my favorites. AC/DC. I mean, there's just so many things that I have grabbed from different cultures, and the fact that I didn't get this worries me. Why did this fall through the cracks for me? And one of the things that was said about them is the fact that they were so loved by Canadians kind of worked against them in the United States, that they would sell out their shows with all Canadians and no Americans got to go. So I think maybe there was something working against them for some reason that just didn't grab them and pull them into the United States consciousness. I don't know what it was, but we were dumb, because I would have been into them from the beginning, I think, if I knew who they were. I think I love storytellers, writer storytellers when it comes to bands like REM, They gave a very REM type vibe to me, kind of
Mm.
folksy storytellers.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm going to mention another Atlanta-based band. I live here now, but I'm not from here. But the Indigo Girls also do a lot of storytelling in their music. They're also very folksy. And I found parts of this music kind of akin to that. And those are bands that I adore. I have albums. I recorded a song by the Indigo Girls for my wedding. I just, there's so many bands that I love that are similar to Tragically Hip. I would have been into them. So thank you very much for this. Again, I don't get why I didn't know about them. And now that I know, they're on my list of things to listen to. So you don't have to feel vulnerable. We're all in with them.
Well, that's good. I'm gonna. I have to try to find things that would put them in the proper context as to how, because I can say that they're important to Canadians, but it's something that, I have to put in a certain perspective that would Americans could relate to. And when they were doing their final show in Canada, over 11 million people were watching that live broadcast. And if you put that in American terms, that's equivalent to a Super Bowl audience of about 113 or 130 million or wherever it is. So it's on that same playing field as in terms of impact. So they're an interesting group. And you mentioned Rush. For me, that like they're the 1-2 bands in Canada. But I'm of that age group as well, because these bands were started in the 80s. So I was listening to them back then. Whereas Rush is a much more esoteric, progressive rock band, which they have, just a 3-member band. They're all very technically proficient musicians. The drummer Neil Peart, who also tragically passed away from brain cancer, was often, in the top 3 all-time drummers. If you go to any list, they'll always mention Neil Peart, and their music was much more at the time they were much more for geeks. I think that's changed now, just because of the way music's evolved and the fact that they were so technically proficient with their instruments, but they don't have the same hold on people. Admire them for their musical abilities, but Tragically Hip, people just love them because they felt like a drinking buddy, or whatever you want to call it, family member. And their lead singer Gord Downey, he had, he could strut. He's got a certain style to it. You may not like it, you may like it, but he's definitely a showman, and he is not always the easiest person to understand lyric wise. Sometimes I find it's hard to understand what he's saying, but if you get into their lyrics, though, they're much more open to interpretation. Probably the most popular song, "Ahead by a Century," you could interpret that in several different ways, but they just have, like the lyrics from the first verse is like, "First thing we'd climb a tree, and maybe then we'd talk or sit silently and listen to our thoughts. With illusions of someday cast in a golden light, no dress rehearsal, this is our life." And basically that song repeats, and then the very last line is, "And disappointing you is getting me down." So, which puts a whole new meaning on the song too, because up until that point you could interpret it as one way. And the band always seems to be able to find a certain musical hook with a guitar riff or whatnot that they repeat. So they're much more of a traditional band structurally, whereas if you listen to Rush, they can transition from fast to slow to rock to reggae, like all in the same song. "Spirit of Radio," if you listen to that song, you'll just be blown away by how many different musical styles they put into one song. But and the lyrics in Rush songs are really good too, but the lyrics in the Tragically Hip songs are much more ephemeral. I don't know exactly what the right words, but one of my favorite set of lyrics from them is, from Wheat Kings, which is based on a true story about a falsely accused man who's put in prison for over 20 years before he's finally found innocent based on DNA technology finally proving that he was not the guilty party. But it just starts with sundown in the Paris of the prairies. Wheat Kings have all treasures buried, and all you hear are the rusty breezes pushing around weather vane Jesus, which just paints a perfect mental image. Like, you know, something like Springsteen's, you know, Racing in the Streets. It's kind of got that. It just grabs you. If you're in that environment, you can really picture it. I don't know for you guys how those kind of lyrics work, but it's just yeah, there's just something so captivating about it. And you know, and then you put it with the, you know, the music that they play with it, with the guitar and whatnot, that it just really works for me. It's yeah, it's really hard to talk about them in any extended way, because it's such an emotional experience that which music is. And I'm just curious, I guess, what were, I don't know how many songs you guys listen to, but Karen, did you have a couple of songs that you really dug? Or
Yeah, Wheat Kings was one of mine, definitely. The line that struck me from that was, "No one's interested in something you didn't do." And I mean, that really got to me. It gave me chills, kind of.
Yeah, I also liked you can't be fond of living in the past, because if you are, then there's no way you're gonna last.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, it applies to so many things. They were definitely talking about this one case. And then at the end of the video that I watched, there was a list of other people who I'm assuming were wrongly in prison.
Right.
And that does happen in America as well, even though it's not like publicized or anything so much. But it really struck me. I became very emotional with some of these songs. Wheat Kings, definitely. Ahead by a Century as well. That one was, I mean, and the video for that one as well, where the two kids are up in the tree, and then, you know, it shows him, I guess part of that was him having that kind of dream when he was stung by the hornet or whatever. I mean, I'm hoping I'm getting that right. And I thought that was evocative, that song, of maybe being nostalgic for your past and learning to live in the present. And
not living up to the expectations of your partner. And
exactly.
So yep.
And the other one you gave us, Bob
Cajun.
Bob Cajun, thank you.
Yep. It's a small cottage community up north of Toronto, about 3 hours. Yeah,
that's cool. I loved the images in that one as well, which apparently was about a riot.
Yeah.
And so you see, you know, we're becoming very jaded about our police presences, that they're in it for power. That's not the case with all law enforcement. And this really showed how this took a toll on a man who's just trying to, you know, make sure that people do what they're supposed to do, and try and break up stuff. And the fact that he falls into his woman's arms after coming home from this riot. I mean, I was moved with all three of these songs. Those were standouts for me. And I watched my YouTube playlist several times, just even in the background of me doing stuff, I had it on. And even my husband, who is not into the same kind of music I'm into, I'll put it that way, he said, "Who is that?" And I told him about that we were going to talk about the Tragically Hip and who they were, and he got interested enough to go to my playlist and listen. So the fact that someone else who is not really into this singer-songwriter type music identified with some of the lyrics, with the sound, I thought that was really cool as well. So, I mean, I love those.
Cool. Jesse?
Yeah, what I did is I took the songs you had given me,
Mhm.
and then I went to Skip and Josh's episode, and they each gave their top 7. So
Mhm.
I built a playlist and listened to them. Bob Cajun by far is my favorite song.
Mhm.
It just, I love, maybe because it isn't as heavy rock and roll as others,
Mhm.
but the lyrics about, could have been Willie Nelson, could have been the wine,
Yep.
the
Saw
the
the
whole just,
constellations. Yep.
yeah, for the first time, just so beautiful, and there's so much aching in that voice. The
Mhm.
other one that I really, really, I'm on record that Bruce Springsteen's song "Better Days" from
Mhm.
the album when he was away from the E Street Band is one of my favorite songs. It's the idea of enjoying life, that
Right.
that too many don't people enjoy the journey. So ahead by a century that opens, first thing we'd climb a tree, and maybe then we talk or sit silently, listen to our thoughts with the illusion of someday cast in a golden light. No dress rehearsal. This is our life. I, that is such a powerful statement.
Mhm.
If I could, if I had a magic whisk, I would get rid of hypocrisy because
Mhm.
of all the political crap going on.
Right.
But I would love, if I gave any advice to this world, is savor your life. Savor every moment of your life, because it is, you never know what's coming up, and you don't want to spend your life going, well, I wish back in the time I could go back and enjoy the journey you're on now. So I really enjoyed that song a lot. And the
Mhm.
other thing I wanted to mention is you sent us some links, and they showed a Canadian writer interviewing the lead singer, and there was such a sadness of, I know I'm dying. It I now can't remember things, and to we have been shocked. John Lennon being killed, Prince dying out of nowhere, Glenn Fry. I mean, during COVID, we lost so many musicians, and but to see someone going through a very public of fight, we know the ending, but we're going to fight it by tooth and nail and enjoy every moment of life till it takes me, is both incredibly inspiring and incredibly sad.
Mhm.
I feel the emotion. And um, Josh sent an email saying that, when the day he died, right, he said all of Canada is mourning. And
Mhm.
I don't think that's an over exaggeration. And I was trying to think, and Karen, do you have an idea of an American artist that would make us feel that way?
Prince
I don't.
definitely, I think, was one that we were all
Yeah,
shocked by
yeah,
and hit hard, for me at
yeah,
least. And on a lesser note, Kurt Cobain, maybe.
yeah.
He had a huge impact on the grunge rock scene, and so for him to be that tortured and us not know about it, and for him just to be suddenly gone. I had their albums, and I have a connection through David Grohl, but I, I thought that was shocking to me as well. Anytime someone that you like, you like their stuff, you like their attitude. Anytime something happens like that, even if they know about it ahead of time, like Gord did, it still hurts a
Mhm.
lot. And you mentioned Neil Peart. That one also hurt me.
Mhm.
And he actually has a place in our history as well. I mean, he's a known quantity. He was referred to on Archer, on the show Archer.
No.
So I mean, it permeates everything, especially people that give us, you mentioned how music can be so personal, but also so all encompassing, and it gives you a community, but it also is very, it's a very solo activity. I mean, there's many different ways you can experience music. And when something tragic happens, and I know Tragically Hip, that really hurts too, to know that that's their name, and it's also their legacy. It's a huge loss, huge. And when you were saying how that concert went out to millions and millions of people, that was one of the links that you gave us to that final performance. And listening to that song in particular 3 different times, and seeing him sing it live for the last time, it just made me cry. And then hearing him sing it for the last time and seeing the reaction of all the fans, them singing along, them getting choked up, that also choked me up. And then the video of when they did it originally, it gives you that connection, and it tells not only the story of the song, but his story. And it just, anytime something like that happens, it's wrenching. And I would definitely put it in the realm of like a Prince, or and I might have had my differences about Michael Jackson, but he also had a huge impact on music. And when he died, that was also a shock. And it hurts people when that happens. It's like a physical pain almost, because they have touched you in ways that it's hard to explain. And so when they go, that's done. I mean, you have all their past stuff, but you'll never hear anything new from them. And that's hurts.
Yeah. I can only think, like, it's different circumstances, but to me it's on the sort of the same scale as John Lennon. And
I was going to bring that up. Absolutely.
Circumstances are quite different, and the suddenness of that. I mean, at least Gord had the time to prepare for it. But I'm glad you mentioned those videos, Karen. Showing the across Canada crowds singing to that last song. It's just an amazing performance. The fact that his surgery was so extensive to remove what tumor they safely could, cancer they safely could, that his memory was pretty well shot. I mean, he does that interview with Peter Mansbridge, who is like a legendary news anchor in Canada, and everybody knows who he is. But even with him, Gord says, I have to write your name on my hand, otherwise I might forget it and call you Jeff or something instead. Like, so the fact that he was able to go out and perform those songs, he had to use a monitor with the lyrics and that, it's still quite amazing. And the thing with Gord Downie is he spent a good portion of his life also promoting awareness of the plight of Native people in Canada. I mean, we've had some amazing and very disturbing revelations about our history with how we treated Native people, things that I had not heard of when I was growing up until I think the last 10 years. Like, we've had these schools where we would force kids to go to, and there was like mass killings and burials of these kids, and it's it's very disturbing and very gut-wrenching to find out that we had this kind of history, because Canadians always like to think of themselves as more civilized, have a less violent history than most other countries. But to find out that this stuff was going on, it's been quite a shock for Canadians, and for Gord Downie to devote quite a bit of time to the Native Indian, Native American, Canadian culture is quite something to see. And it also just reminds you of your own mortality. because now like he passed away in 2017, so it's already been 5 years. I like, it just seems like a blink of the eye, you know. It's just crazy. I'm just wondering how, from those few interview snippets that you saw in that, Jesse and Karen, what struck you the most about Gord Downie as a person? Let's go with you first, Jesse.
Well, he seemed very, very caring, and also, you know, loved sharing music and loved being Canadian.
And he loved the Bee Gees.
Oh, really?
Very nice.
Yeah, that was in
is
that interview with
awesome.
Peter Manchurch. Yes, I know it's not cool, but man, those guys could sing.
They could.
Well, they can. You know, there
Yeah.
is something, one of the things they talked about in the Ken Burns History of Country Music documentary is there is like the Everly Brothers,
Mhm.
or the Gatlin brothers, or the Carter family. There is something about blood that when you sing together and you're related, there is a beauty to that harmony. Worse, I thought he showed a lot of grace in his ending.
Mhm.
And take a drink, of course. I'm going to bring up Bruce Springsteen. One of the things that I was really impressed with is that when Bruce put out his autobiography, he talked about how much depression had affected his life and how he had struggled with depression all his adult life, which I thought was very powerful, because the casual person will say, you're Bruce effing Springsteen, you're a millionaire, how can you be depressed? And it is not. It is based on, it is a medical condition. So I love the grace, the strength, the openness. Chadwick Bosworth died of colon cancer. I don't know if he talked a lot about that to that. It was a surprise to me, because I'm a survivor of colon cancer, and to hear that he died of something that I fought was like, oh my goodness. And to be very brave and to say, this is what I'm fighting, this is what I'm doing. There is a wonderful documentary about Glenn Campbell facing Alzheimer, and it is talking about his journey, and I recommend it very strongly because he talks about, on stage, most of the time everything comes back and he can sing the songs, but then when he was off stage, he would not recognize and know people. So yeah, I truly don't know if there's dirt out there about them, because most rock stars have some dirt. But from my perspective, he just seemed like a great, charismatic front man that seemed very dedicated to the music. And I love the idea that he was also a social activist, because, growing up, I loved that John Denver fought against world hunger. So yeah, great stuff.
Yeah, I thought his humor in that interview was striking. He's facing his mortality. You can see that in the interview. But he's determined to make the most of what he has. And that was inspiring to me. Jesse, you mentioned that you identified with that because you're a survivor of the same affliction as Chadwick Boseman. And I feel that way as well about people like Terry Garr has MS, Annette Funicello died of MS. And so when I see people that I identify with and that are suffering as well, but they're managing to make the most of their situation, it really buoys me. And I love that he took the opportunity to not only continue with his life, but also be open about it and maybe hopefully give others hope, make them feel better about themselves, where he could have just been selfish and gone to the woods and lived out the rest of his days, self-pity. But instead he decided he was gonna be happy in the days he had left. And I'm sure there were bouts of depression or, things like that. But I really do think that he took joy in life. I could see that he lived every day with as much emotion as he had. You can see it in his music, in the times that we see him talking to people, interviews and just comments he's made. I did a little bit of a dive into, him being interviewed or giving comments or something like that. I watched the performance on SNL as well.
Mm-hmm.
The one performance they had on SNL. And I really do feel like you could feel his emotions every day, every step of the way. And so to see him, and it's authentic because you've seen it
Mm-hmm.
in his life up to that point. And so the way that he acted, felt, he was self-deprecating. It touched me, and it was something I thought to myself, well, he's not only is he touching people with what he's saying and doing, but I feel like he's also giving people that have suffered from ailments, he's giving them hope, making them identify with other people, showing them that other people go through these things as well. So I think he would have been someone I would have loved to sit down and have a drink with, because I think he would have really been someone that I'd like to know. And I think that showed in that interview, because they were friends, these two men. And I think the interviewer was shaken in points during that interview. And that it was really, it hit me during that interview. So
yeah. It's interesting because just you mentioned courage, and one of their songs is Courage. I don't know if that was on your playlist or not, but it's also based on a true Canadian story about a man that had a childhood sweetheart who was married to someone else, and that her husband went off to war and was reported killed. So they ended up getting married, and then the husband came back. And that song was called Courage. And one of the lyrics go, "There's no simple explanation for anything important any of us do. And yeah, the human tragedy consists in the necessity of living with the consequences under pressure. Courage, my word, it didn't come. It doesn't matter. Courage, it can come at a worse time." So it's, they take these Canadian things and they turn them into these types of songs, which is, I think, at the secret of their part of their success. I mean, there's no, like, Gord Downie is easily the most extroverted member of the band. He loves to strut. You see the outlandish costumes, not quite on the Elton John level of outlandishness, but they're up there. They're up there, and he puts on a good show. But yeah, so he's definitely a very interesting character. I wanted to ask you both. There's one song, just by the title, I have to ask you what your thoughts of it were. And this song was written pre-flood, but that song is "New Orleans is Sinking." I wonder, Karen, what do you think of that song?
yeah, again, I mean, I thought the song was very lyrical. The words were great. And I did see that there were times that they stopped playing it in deference to Katrina sufferers, but that New Orleans had actually embraced the song. And I mean, that just shows that things touch people in different ways. Some people didn't want to hear it because it hurt them to hear it. And then some people took it as an uplifting moment. Even though it was written beforehand, they could still draw something into themselves. So yeah, it's almost like, he didn't know it was going to happen, obviously, but the fact that it meant something different to him, obviously. But the fact that people could take that and either, be upset by it. I mean, that's still a reaction.
Yeah, that's why I asked, because I'm just curious, because when I assume Americans hear this, learn of this song, they're going to think, oh, he's writing about the flood, but it's not. It's pre-flood. So.
No. And it doesn't bother me, even if you wrote it after the flood, because it's an experience. So, you write about things that you want to talk about, essentially. So, yeah.
Cool. Jesse?
There is a wonderful scene in the HBO series called Treme, which is set in New Orleans post-Katrina. And the singer, John Hyatt, is being filmed in the House of Blues. And the series is really all about New Orleans and music. And so they had amazing, true musicians. Not only Steve Earle has a part where he plays someone besides him, they have actual musicians perform. And John is doing his song Feels Like Rain. And, down here, the river meets the sea, and then the sticky heat, I feel you open up to me. Love comes out of nowhere, baby, like a hurricane, and it feels like rain. So the Steve Earle character and another character, which is a young female violinist, is watching John talk, and she's like, I can't believe he's captured the feeling of Katrina so much. And Steve says he wrote that 10 years before Katrina. and that's the beauty of music. Yep. Music can take on its own thoughts. I immediately, when I heard the song, I just know growing up in Louisiana that New Orleans is under sea level. That's why they don't they do not put people when they are buried, they use them in vaults above ground because they can't do anytime it rains. So yeah, I thought it was beautiful. The idea of this this almost insolvable, right? This where I can't get out of my where, right? This my memory is muddy. What's that river that I'm in? New Orleans is sinking and I don't want to swim, right? I don't want to keep fighting. It's just really beautifully well done.
I also think it's a tribute to that he likes New Orleans the way it is, and he doesn't want it to change. So
yes,
yeah.
And then I thought also the 38 years old is an incredibly
another true story,
strange show. Yeah, that was it sounds like a catchy pop song, but it really is more than that, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's about a guy that went to prison because he killed the guy that raped his sister.
Yeah.
So 38 years old, never kissed a girl.
Yeah. It is the thing about the Tragically Hip, from based on what little bit I've seen and based on what you've shared with me, is they wanted their music to mean something. And every once in a while, when I saw Bruce he was doing his Devils and Dust tour, it was just him, a guitar, a couple guitars and a keyboard, and he did a lot of talking between songs. And he was talking about Waiting on a Sunny Day. And he says, and sometimes you just write a pop song. I'm thinking I want to be, I want to be, the Four Tops. I want to be the Miracles. And I just want to write a pop song that has no other meaning besides that. And then other times, like Nebraska, is this album filled with stories that are some based on facts, some based on fiction. And as my partner on my John Hyatt podcast says, Sylvan said, they all have emotional truth, whether they're based on a true story or not. Great songs have emotional truths to them. And I believe that's what the Hip did.
Yeah. They have a song that covers kind of both of those vein lines of, meaning something, but also having some fun. And that one, that's a song called Boots or Hearts. And it's, oh, fingers and toes, 40 things we share. Oh, 41, if you include the fact that we don't care. See, when it starts to fall apart, man, it really falls apart. Like boots or hearts, or when they start, they really fall apart. Well, fall apart. Yeah, their lyrics are something else. I just, I just can't think of too many other, well, there are musicians that do it. Like, I think Springsteen is an obvious example that does really well with painting pictures with a few words. Tragically Hip for me is right up there. I want to thank you both for taking this time. I'm really gratified that you both enjoyed the music. For listeners out there who want to get a real good taste of the Hip, I would highly recommend their album Fully Completely, which has, like Jesse said, he made a list of their 7 favorite songs and whatnot. I think most of those songs are actually on that album. Oddly enough, the title track Fully Completely is my least favorite song in the album, but everything else is just fantastic. So yeah, check out that album Fully Completely. And I want to thank both of you for climbing up this tree with me, this big, glorious Canadian maple tree, and experiencing a little bit of the Tragically Hip. And I would just give each of you a chance for last thoughts.
Yeah, music has been a thread for me through my entire life. My mother and I both sang. We sang in the car together. And I was a choir nerd, definitely. In elementary school, we would sing, and I would love that. And then going through junior high and high school, I was in all the choirs. I was in the choir that danced. I was in the madrigals. I was in the regular choir, So singing is personal to me as well. And whenever I find a band or a group that has that same connection to music and I can feel it, I feel like we're kindred spirits. And so finding this band, listening to their songs, hearing their lyrics, finding out the stories behind them, it was a genuine treat for me.
Oh, thank you. Great. Jesse.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to, I'm hoping you and I can figure out a time where you can join me on the podcast, the Set Listing Bruce, and we'll do a whole episode about your journey with them and your other band that you loved. And why am I drawing a blank on Rush? Yes, I kept wanting to go Rook, and I'm like, no, it's not Rook, it's not Rust. It's
what a feeling! What a rush!
I'm old, yes. But this has been a really fun. We originally talked about doing this several weeks ago, and then because of other things, we got delayed. And so I've been able to spend some time with the music, and we all agreed that was a good thing because, it's hard to, okay, I'll listen to the songs 2 or 3 times and then talk about it. We were able to much more spend this. So I was very happy, and I will continue listening to them. I think I will keep them on a regular playlist because I do think it's beautiful music, and it's a warmness that I really enjoy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll again thank you both, and for listeners, again, Fully Completely, check it out. And if you want to hear more from us about other things like Springsteen or Devs or Midnight Mass or the English. So please check out our other JKL Media podcasts. And Jesse, where can people find you?
I am on Twitter at Jesse Jackson DFW. By the way, I just saw an article that listed the Netflix best things to binge, and including that was Haunting of Hill House. So I know you both have recommended that. I need to go back and watch that.
Yeah, you should watch Blind
yeah.
Manor first, though, I think.
Okay,
yeah.
Good. Yes, but you can find me on Twitter. Let us know what we're going, and hopefully you'll check out some music. The Tragically Hip has a very diverse style of music, and I think you'll enjoy it. Karen?
Yeah, what were we doing? Wrapping things up?
Yeah. Where can people find you?
Oh yeah, sorry. I'm at Elevaria on Twitter, and you can find me in my bio. There's a link to my blog. You can find me there with a bunch of other links and other things. And I have already favorited the Tragically Hip on Amazon Music, so you won me over, definitely.
Awesome.
Yes.
Okay. And I can be found on YouTube at Lose Reviews, as well as on Twitter at Lou W. Sitzmore, the S King podcast. And I'll just leave you with these closing lyrics from the Tragically Hip. Wheat kings and pretty things, wait and see what tomorrow brings. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
And scene.
Oh, that was awesome.
Great. That was
Thanks,
fun.
guys. I really
Thank you,
appreciate
Lou.
that.